So moving into like the deeper end of things, I know we talked about how you grew up biracial a little bit, and I think that segued us into a couple of really interesting topics last time. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm half black, half white. I know I
Hmm.
don't really look it. My mother's black, my father's white. It's definitely a different dynamic than obviously you, for example.
Yeah.
But what's even more kind of unique, in a weird way, is typically you'll find like a black man with a white woman, but it's the
Mm.
opposite for, I guess, my family.
Yeah.
I was raised. How do I put this? I was raised in like a different household. My dad was never home because he was always working. My mom would always work too, so I was basically shipped off to my brother and I were shipped off to my grandmother, and
Nice.
she adopted my mother. She's also black, so she adopted my mother, and
Okay.
I would grow up with my cousins who are all black, which is awesome.
Aw.
We're all really tight. We're really close. So I mean, I got to, I guess, I grew accustomed to, I guess, that sort of lifestyle that they lived,
Yeah.
and I loved it. It's just what I know now. Whereas like my father's side of the family isn't as close as I guess we would all like to be.
Yeah, I think I don't know if that's a stereotype or not, or maybe not so much a stereotype, but an observation that I've noticed that Black families tend to be a lot closer. And I learned about that when I was in school too. It's kind of like a generational protection mechanism. Like you protect your people so that you know that they're always protected because you can't necessarily rely on other people to do that. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
And the neighborhood my grandmother lived in wasn't bad by any means.
Hmm.
It's had its fair share of like negatives, but I would say
Hmm.
overall it was a positive. Like I have tons of memories of being at my grandmother's house, staying there on the weekends, growing up, doing a lot of fun stuff with my cousins because they were always there. And my parents, not that they just didn't want to raise us, it's just they were busy, they were working. My dad always owned his own business and he was working at his main job on top of that. And my mom would work the business and do her main job on top of that.
Oh,
So they were
wow.
just always busy. My parents always worked two jobs. So my grandmother, who was retired, basically raised us for a couple of years. It was awesome.
Listen, I get that. I am also a child of being shipped off to your grandparents, and
Mhm,
I was very lucky to have two wonderful sets of grandparents to help my parents when they needed that help. So
mhm.
I am a big grandparent advocate,
I
truthfully.
agree.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I want to have children sooner than later because A, I want my children to know my grandparents as much as they possibly can. And B, I want my parents to be younger grandparents so that
I
they're
agree with
able
that.
to
Yeah.
give my children that same experience. So
Um,
I get that.
I've always thought that like the way you grow up with your family is basically how you'll be with your children, like how you'll
Hmm.
sort of raise your children. And my father, for example, he basically was raised by his grandparents as well, mainly because like marital issues with my grandparents. They were all both always working when they were together and stuff like that. So my parents or my grandparents would ship my dad off to
To his
his grandparents.
grandparents.
Yeah. So I think that's sort of like trickled down to us as well, my brother and I, where
Hmm.
he would always be working. So he would just say, oh, let's just have the grandparents raise them, not raise them, but watch them. And it just turned into a weekend thing.
So you have this brother who went with you, but you mentioned three other brothers, right?
So my two oldest brothers, they live with their mother. They're half brothers, but they're basically
Okay.
their family anyway. So
Oh
they
yeah,
live
of
with their
course.
mother because they have severe mental disabilities. So
Okay.
they live with their mother, whereas the brother just above me, he and I grew up together because we're only 3 years apart. Whereas my two
Okay.
oldest, they're 11 years older than I am. So
Okay.
they're
Yeah.
much older. So they were able to be with their mother while I was with my parents, and my brother was
Hmm.
with us as well. So we would basically get shipped off because they're older. They didn't have to be. They would just be with their mom.
Yeah, they were with their mom. Yeah, that makes sense.
Um,
But it's nice that you
and
had a brother to go through that with,
oh,
to
absolutely, absolutely.
experience all of that.
And I will say, like, because my brother's 3 years older than me, he got to experience certain things I never got to because my cousins are all older than me as well. I'm the youngest.
Oh, you're the
So
youngest,
they
yeah.
would be able to do things. I would have to stay with either my aunt or my grandmother while they were out doing something. And it kind of
Mm.
sucked, but like I understand now because I was so young. But we're still very close, all of us. Like we're all really, really tight. Even now, like
That's
we hang out,
that
we
is
still talk and
so
stuff like that.
amazing. Yeah.